Hello and welcome to Blue Ridge Community Church. My name's Jeremy. I'm one of the pastors and teachers here at Blue Ridge. If you're new here, you can look around. You can see we do things a little non-traditional around here. If no one gave you kind of a context for that, let me kind of explain real quickly why we do what we do around here. You see, our mission as a church is to help people follow Jesus, and we do that by equipping disciples, that is current followers of Jesus, to make other disciples. And while there are lots of aspects to equipping disciples, two that are vitally important, we think, are community and connection with one another, and learning that moves just from listening to someone talk at us for like 40 minutes to engaging with and hearing from one another. Because here's the deal, if we can't do that type of stuff here, how are we ever going to do it? Are we ever gonna make disciples out in the quote unquote real world? And so that's part of what you see us trying to accomplish and being faithful to what we believe God has asked us to do. Now, we've been doing it for over a year now, and so the lessons we've learned along the way: one, it helps if there's at least 4 people at every table. 2, that there's a variety of ages at each table. That's just helpful to have different life experiences in these conversations. And 3, that it's more than just the people you came with, family, things like that. There's a mix of, again, just stories and life experiences at the table. I just found that to be useful as we're going through this process. So in a few moments, if you're a regular here, you know this, I'm gonna ask you guys to stand up and face actually out from your table. And you're gonna use that as an opportunity to greet one another. But also, if you're a Blue Ridger, would you invite, and you see a table, would you either invite people over to join you, or would you join someone else's table so that we can all have the best experience possible this morning? So get everybody stand up, face out, and introduce yourself to someone. Okay, awesome, guys. Awesome. If you haven't done it already, I'd love for you guys to pull out a card, put your name on it, fold it in half, and put it out, facing out from you. That way, people know your name. They don't have to remember it. While you guys are doing that, for those of you watching online, welcome, or out in the cafe, welcome. If you're watching online, I'd ask you to introduce yourself in the chat below, put your name in there. And if this is the main way that you engage with us is through online, I'd ask that you would pray. Ask God, who do you want me to invite in? So it's not just me alone doing this, but I have my own circle, my own table, if you will, wherever you're engaging with us. And see what God may do. Awesome? Well, cool, guys. Here's where I want to begin. I want to begin by asking this question. What is one small action or behavior someone has done recently that made you feel appreciated or supported? What's one small action or behavior someone has done recently that made you feel appreciated or supported? So this could be anything. The word small is used there like on purpose. Like this could be a text message you got. This could be an email you received. This could be something somebody said to you at work. It could be from a complete stranger. It could be from a friend. It could be something your kids did that you didn't have to ask them to do. Something a roommate did or didn't do because you've asked them to stop doing that or whatever. It could be any of these things. What's something that's small that recently has happened that's made you feel appreciated or supported in something that you've done? Makes sense? Take about 3 minutes. We've been having technical problems all morning with the power outages, different things like that we've had here. So the timer's messed up. So I'll just kind of give you guys a heads up when we're about halfway through and we got about 30 seconds left. So you got 3 minutes. Okay, go for it, guys. About halfway, minute 30 left. Thirty seconds. Okay, I'm gonna interrupt wherever you're at. Your bigger tables probably didn't get all the way around, so that's okay. Well, for me, I was, when I thought about this, I thought about a couple of weeks ago. You see, a couple weeks ago was my daughter's spring breaks, both of my daughter's spring breaks. And so as a family, we decided we were gonna go camping with something we love to do. And so we went down to Asheville, or south of Asheville, North Carolina, to a small town of Brevard, where we camped as a family. But because it was gonna be camping in the middle of the week, I was gonna miss some work. And so therefore I was gonna miss some meetings I'm normally a part of. One of those meetings was what we call our teaching team meeting. If you're new here, none of the series that we do here, or how we approach the series, developing the series, and the talks we give on stage are always done in a team approach, not just with the individual. And so I was gonna miss that Tuesday afternoon meeting. And so I texted out the team that said, hey, it's my girl's spring break, we're gonna be camping, and so I'll miss the meeting this week. And so normally when somebody sends me a text like that, I'll like it to acknowledge that I got it, right? And then I'll say something like, have fun, or have a great time along the way. But this is the text message I got in return from one of the team members. It says, have fun, love your intentionality with this type of investment. And I think we can all appreciate just small things like that, where we feel seen, right? Where we feel validated or encouraged or appreciated in something that we're doing. And I thought about this several times throughout the week as I was there with my kids and my wife and investing in this intentional way. I thought about these words multiple times. But you know what's funny? Other than this heart that I put on the message, I never circled back around and told the person that these words impacted me, that I thought about them, that they were meaningful to me. And I wonder if when you were sharing, and maybe you didn't get around to sharing, that's okay, but the story you had in your mind, I wonder, did you ever circle around and beyond just saying thank you or doing what I did hardly, did you ever circle back around and say, hey, what you said or what you did, that was meaningful, that was appreciated, this is how it made me feel? And even if you did in this one instance, is that the norm for you? If you're like me, it's not. And here's the deal. If you're like me, that's what today is specifically for people like you and me, people who tend to struggle with this whole idea of encouragement. Now, if you answered yes and yes, I acknowledge this, and yes, I do this regularly, like that's just naturally who I am, I do that naturally, then two things. One is this, you can still get stuff from today, but two is this, we need you to keep on modeling this for us. Okay, we've been in this series called You and Me, where we've been talking about this whole idea that the smallest expression of the church is not you alone or me alone, but you and me together, that I need you and you need me. And to cultivate the types of relationships that we need. We've been talking about these practical tools over the last few weeks, these practical tools to cultivate relationships and friendships that will help us mature into the expression of the church that God desires for us to be. Another lens through which to look at this these last couple of weeks, we find here in Colossians 3, it says, whatever you do, Paul writes, whether in word or in deed, do it all in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God the Father through him. You see, the first couple of weeks of this kind of, as we moved into the practical aspect, these practical tools, we've been looking at kind of the deeds side of things. So we've been talking about things like hospitality and bearing one another's burdens, like Drew talked about last week. Well, over the next couple of weeks, we're gonna be talking about the words side of things. How the words we use affect the type of friendships and relationships that we're talking about. Another illustration here is this. Now, what is this? Bet you didn't expect that, right? That's what this is what they call a solar generator, okay? It's basically a big rechargeable battery. Okay, that's what this is. See, I told you that my family and I, we like to camp. In fact, my wife and I, we just celebrated our 20th anniversary this last week. And so we were gone this last week. Thank you, appreciate that. So you probably won't, some of you won't clap for this next one. So we were gone this last week and we camped this last week together. My wife's idea, okay? So you're like, what kind of husband drags his wife on a camping trip for their 20th? Well, she drugged me. No, it was something we wanted to do together, in there. So anyway, about 2019, I took this enclosed utility utility trailer, and it's about 10 feet long, and I turned it into kind of our own little tiny home / mini camper that we do. And we don't like camping at campgrounds, things like that. We like dispersed wilderness areas away from everyone. And so it had to be able to be powered on its own, but we wanted some creature comforts like a 12-volt fridge, some lights in there, fan, things like that. And so that's where this came into place, where this is what powers everything. And so you go on the camping trip and you bring this and it's fully charged, and over the days that you're gone, it depletes from use. But right here is a solar charge port that I've got 2 deployable solar panels that I can place out, capture the sun, that captures the energy and starts to refill this battery bank. And that's a picture of what we're talking about. You see, the reality is we all have these physical, emotional, and spiritual banks inside of us, right? But walking throughout life within this world, those places get depleted over time. And one of the things that God is using you for in my life and me for in your life is to help be, quote unquote, these solar panels that capture the sun's power and help fill us back up as we are depleted along the way. And words, and the words we use, are one of the most powerful tools we have in helping refill each other's spiritual, physical, and emotional banks. And so that's what we want to look at today. So before we jump in, would you pray with me? Jesus, I just thank you that we do get to do this together. I thank you that there's such a variety of personalities and life experiences and spiritual giftings and ways we approach life. And for some of us, it's a no-brainer to encourage others to think about it. But others like myself, it's more of a struggle. It's something that requires intentionality. It's not natural, and we regularly mess it up. And so I pray that together, again, this is a picture of the church, us together, that we could learn from one another together, that we could learn from you together as we walk this out. It's in your name we pray, Jesus. Amen. So I want to begin. If you got a Bible, you can open up to Matthew chapter 16. That's where we're going to be. And I think we can all appreciate the need for encouragement and its importance. But what does it really look like? Well, we want to look at this passage, and it's a point where I believe Jesus is encouraging a group of people. Now, it's not a classic passage you go to investigate encouragement, but I really do believe it's there. You see, we're going to read down through 13 through 20, and we're not going to get to verse 21. But in verse 21, it talks about from basically this point on, after this episode we're gonna read about, that Jesus was regularly sharing and preparing his disciples and letting them know that he's gonna have to go to Jerusalem to die. And it's gonna lead to one of the most painful periods and confusing periods in their lives as they walk through this, and obviously Jesus's life. And so I truly do believe Jesus is encouraging them to help prepare them for this hard thing that he knows they're not gonna understand and that they're not gonna fully grasp up to this point. So here's what I want you to do. At your table, table. You're gonna have one person out loud read verses 13 through 20. If you don't like reading, don't worry, someone else at your table will. So read out loud verses 13 through 20. Then, after you've read that out loud, as a table, discuss this. In what ways did Jesus encourage his disciples? And what can we learn from his examples? Now, try to look beyond the obvious. It's okay to point out the obvious, but don't just sit there. Do some critical thinking. Get below the surface. Like I said, this isn't kind of a classic encouragement passage, so it may not be obvious the first time through. But what does Jesus do? Who's he with? What does he say? How does all of this help us see how Jesus was encouraging these people and what we can learn from his example? In fact, it's helpful if you get stuck after a couple of minutes. I'm gonna give you about 6 minutes to do this. You're gonna have plenty of time there. If you get stuck, have someone else read it in a different version along the way. And after you've gone through it, discuss it a little bit and see what else starts to pop out. Does that make sense? Awesome, gonna give you 6 minutes. I'll let you know when we're halfway and when we hit the minute mark. Go for it, guys. Halfway, 3 minute mark. Remember, if you get stuck, have someone read it from a different version and then rediscuss it again. the morning stream.
Am I good? There we go. Guys, again, give the tech guys a hand. They're frantically... They're far more panicked back there than I am. I'm like, hey, we'll just do an all table morning and I can sit down. Okay, so, hey, so hopefully you guys made it through and you guys looked at this. And here's the deal. I always want to remind you guys of this, okay? I really want to really make sure you guys remember this. Guys, when I'm up here and I'm unpacking after you guys have spent time at your table, it doesn't mean my answers are the correct ones and yours are the wrong ones. Okay, if you didn't see the things that we saw or pull it out, that's okay. That's the beauty of what we're doing here, is that collectively we get to learn from one another. And here's the deal. What God had for you may have, the appointment he had for you today may have nothing to do with what's coming next. It may have had to do with the person you met today, may have to do with the interactions at your table, may have to do with just you saying yes to being the one that read. That was the reason that God wanted you here today. Does that make sense? So this is just me sitting at your table, and this is me adding to the part of what I saw as I went through this. And so let's jump in. You see, let me read verse 13 again. It says this: when Jesus came to the region of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, "Who do people say the Son of Man is?" Now, see, for me, we get our first clue of what encouragement looks like when we see who Jesus was with. If you remember the first week of the series, we talked about the relational pyramid and the whole idea that we all have, or that Jesus had strangers, acquaintances, his disciples, which we called his friends, and then his closest friends, those three closest disciples to him. And all of those people played a significant role in different ways in Jesus's ministry and life. And in the same way, if we're gonna become the people that God wants us to become, the church he wants to become, we need to be cultivating those things. But here's the deal. Notice with this encouragement who Jesus is with. He's with his companions. He's with his friends. He's with those closest to him. And here's what I believe it begins to show us. It begins to show us that encouragement tends to be most effective with those closest to us. Okay, it doesn't mean we're not supposed to encourage the stranger. Doesn't mean we're not supposed to encourage the acquaintance. But that our words tend to be most powerful and most effective in filling the tank of different people's lives with those that are closest to us. A super efficient solar panel is about 90% efficient, meaning if it's about 100-watt solar panel, that around 90 watts from a really clear, sunny day is really good efficiency for a solar panel. But you add a little bit of overcastness and that percentage drops. You add a cloudy day, while you can still pull a little bit of energy, it's not gonna be nearly as effective at filling this battery bank. In the same way, just like for us, when it comes to these physical, spiritual, emotional tanks or banks inside of our souls and inside of our body, the reality is our words carry more weight with those that are closer to us. It's why your words can more easily wound those that you're closest to, right? This inverse is also true. One of the most powerful tools you have of helping you, other people, fill up these emotional, physical, and spiritual banks is through those closest to you and the words that you use with them, the type of encouragement. But that's not the only thing we see here. We reread this again. When Jesus came to the region of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, "Who do people say the Son of Man is?" See, this for me, it shows me I often think of encouragement in just nice things that we say, right? And that's part of it. But what I see here is Jesus is asking a question. Jesus is asking a question. You see, this gives us, I believe, another clue into encouragement, and that's this, that encouragement often involves more than just expressing kind words. He's asking them a question. See, does Jesus need to know how people refer to him? No, he's Jesus, right? What's he doing? He's valuing them. He's bringing them into this conversation. He's saying, I see you, I value your thoughts and opinions on this. Who do people say that I am? Think about it. Think about when you're at work and you get invited into a discussion, like from a different department. Somebody just says, hey, we love your experience at this company. And even though this isn't your area, we'd like to invite you into this. And ask your opinion, because we value you. You feel seen, you feel appreciated, you feel supported. Think about when somebody walks into your home and your room, your dorm room, they see the way that you're decorated and they go, hey, this is awesome, would you help me? What they're saying is, I see what you've done, you have value, you're important, and they validate that in their question, which becomes an invitation to engage. I think about years before I was an elder or on the senior leadership team, Dave Kuntz and Woody Torrance, who were elders decades before I was, who were on senior leadership team decades before me, what they would do in my late 20s, they would oftentimes involve me in conversations that were about the whole of Blue Ridge, not just the area I was responsible for. They'd ask me questions and my thoughts about certain things, and they genuinely valued my input. What did that do? That was a source of feeling valued, of being seen, of being encouraged. You see, oftentimes encouragement is more than just kind words. It can come simply in the form of a question that says, I see the value you have, and I'd love to invite you into this. We keep on reading this and what you read. I'm just gonna read through the next handful of verses. It says, they replied, some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, and still others Jeremiah. So they're answering the question that Jesus asked, who do people say that I am? Or one of the prophets. But what about you, Jesus asked? Who do you say that I am? Simon Peter answered, you are the Messiah, the Son of the living God. Jesus replied, blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for this was not revealed to you by flesh or blood, but by my Father in heaven. And I tell you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overcome it. Several things we see here. The first one, and I love this working definition of, real world definition of encouragement. Encouragement catches someone doing something right. Encouragement catches someone doing something right. Jesus caught Peter with this revelation that that Jesus is the Messiah, that he's the Christ. And he uses this, among other things, to encourage Peter along the way, along with these other disciples. You see, it's so easy in the world that depletes us to know all the ways in which we don't measure up, right? To know all the ways in which we fall short, to know all the ways in which we are wrong or incorrect. But becoming a community and cultivating relationships and friendships that look so different from the rest of the world looks in and says, what's so different about you, is a part of becoming a culture of people that catch other people doing things right. Now, it doesn't mean that we don't confront things that are incorrect. Dave's actually gonna talk about that next week. It just means in the world in which we live, that's oftentimes the low-hanging fruit. The easiest thing to do is to point out the faults in one another. But we wanna be a community that cultivates relationships and friendships that add value, that fill up the depleted tank from our Monday through Saturday. We're people that are regularly catching people doing something right, rather than always pointing out what's wrong with one another. And this one, guys, this one's for me. This one is the one of my takeaway for me, that God just kind of put the bullseye on my forehead. You see, sometimes I'll sit there at night and do that thing where you're just kind of reviewing your day as you're starting to fall asleep. And I find myself cringing with embarrassment at myself far more often than I care to admit. Because especially with those closest to me, it's so easy for me to be the chief critic, for me to express my disappointment in them not meeting my expectations for them. And Jesus says, no, Jeremy, I want you to become a person, and I want Blue Ridge to be a place that doesn't shy away from correction, but that catches people doing things right and correct and celebrates that. It's not only that, but we see encouragement in this interaction that Jesus has is most effective when it's specific. Jesus says to Peter, Peter, that thing you just confessed, that I am the Messiah. See, he's specific, that I'm Messiah, that I am the Christ. Peter, guess what? I'm gonna use that. It's on that truth that I'm gonna build my church. And when Jesus was saying that, he wasn't talking about a building, he was talking about a people and a movement. And Jesus is saying, Peter, you don't understand how true and powerful that statement is, because here's the deal, the gates of hell will not be able to stand against the truth that I am the Messiah, that I am the Christ. See, Jesus both is specific in his praise of Peter. Hey, Peter, that is so true. And also shows him the effects that what Peter just did right, and what he just confessed, the effects that it will have. And in the process, what's Jesus doing? He's meeting these disciples and Peter in this place, saying, hey, I'm gonna fill that tank. That battery pack, I'm gonna fill it up. You see, when I think about this, I think about a group I'm a part of. I'm a part of this environment called Disciple Makers, and we've been meeting for about a year. And remember, our mission as a church is to help people follow Jesus, and we do this by equipping disciples to make other disciples. Well, Disciple Makers Lab is experimenting with different ways of making disciples, how disciples make other disciples. And we've been doing it for about a year. And so last time we got together, physically together, we finished up the night by praying for being paired off in partners, and then praying for people in our lives who have yet to follow Jesus, and specifically praying for those people that we would have patience with the process, because it's a process, and that God had patience with us, that we would have patience with the process. And so I was partnered up with this guy named John, who's a friend of mine who's been a part of Disciple Makers for the last year. And John and I, we shared names of people that we could pray for patience with in this process, and we prayed for each other. Little did we know that how specifically God was gonna answer the prayer that John prayed specifically for me and this friend of mine who's yet to follow Jesus within the next 24 hours. Now, normally, if God answers a prayer like that, like maybe the next time I see John, I'd be like, hey, thanks for praying for me. God really worked through you. But in that, the lack of specifics, misses the mark. It misses an opportunity. So this time, rather than just wait, I literally texted John that same day and said, hey, or the next day, if you got 10 or 15 minutes today, would you give me a call? I got to share with you how God specifically answered a prayer. And so he called me back about an hour or so later, and I was able to share with him how God took portions of the prayer that he prayed, and how God opened up a door with this guy that I didn't know when we were gonna have a significant spiritual conversation, and just naturally led us into one of the most deep, meaningful, unforced spiritual conversations I've yet to have with this friend of mine who's yet to follow Jesus. And John and I in that moment were able to worship together, not through song, but through prayer and celebration, thanks and gratitude to God. And both of us got to experience this mutual filling up by God, as we were able to share in the specifics of what God was doing in and through us. Which brings me to the last thing that I noticed in this, and that is encouragement celebrates where we see God in one another. Do you notice what Jesus did with Peter there? He said, Peter, what you just confessed, me as the Christ, me as the Messiah, that didn't come to you but through man, through flesh and blood. It came to you through my Father. Jesus is saying, I see my Father through you right now, Peter. I want you to be encouraged by that. His kingdom, his life, his words are poking through, they're shining through. See, we can have all sorts of deep, really good friendships. We can have all sorts of deep, meaningful relationships. And we can have them in all sorts of places, work, school, roommates, all those kinds of things. But the stuff we're talking about here is stuff that celebrates, like the type of encouragement is the one that pushes us towards Jesus together. And we celebrate when we see that stuff poking through, when we see evidence of his character, of his kingdom shining through. I had a friend, Karen, I prayed with her a couple weeks ago about something her son was going through. And Karen knows me pretty well, and so after this couple days later, she came up to me, and knowing that compassion and gentleness lack in my life, I stink at encouragement, compassion, and gentleness, and you're listening to me. There you go. But knowing that I lack in that area, she came and she said, Jeremy, I just want to let you know, and I'm paraphrasing because it's a longer conversation, but she said this in effect, Jeremy, I just want to let you know that I saw God's compassion and gentleness through you when you prayed for me and my son. That's celebrating. Just something simple like that is acknowledging and celebrating where we see God's character poking through, making its way through us. We all are walking around in a world that depletes us, depletes those emotional, spiritual, and physical banks that we have. The challenge for us is to become the community of people who are looking for opportunities to fill it back up in one another. See, I think we all like to be on the receiving end, but what we're talking about in all of this is to really benefit from the receiving is when we are genuinely looking to be this type of friend for one another first. So with that in mind, I want to finish up by asking this final question. Where can you grow in your encouragement of others? Where can you grow? All of us have room for growth, even for those of us that are naturally more like this. Where can you grow? And maybe it has something to do with what's up here. Maybe it doesn't. This is a summary of just the things I pointed out. Maybe it has something to do with you of what you've already experienced at your table. Here's what I want you to do. I'm going to give you 5 minutes or so here. And I just want you to go around and I want you just to share simply where you can grow in your encouragement of others this week and why. Okay? I'm going to give you 5 minutes and then I'll wrap up our service. Go for it, guys. About halfway. You got about a little over 2 minutes left. About 1 minute left. So I'm gonna interrupt wherever you're at right now. Would you just pray with me so we finish up today? Jesus, I just thank you for the fact, first for you and your example, that in a very real way, you walk us through everyday life of what it looks like, how we live out the callings you have for us as followers of you, Jesus. Your interactions that you've given us with your companions, your disciples, your friends. And I pray that as we go from here, Jesus, sometimes I think we say, oh, well, that's Jesus, that's not us. But this is one of those real world examples of where we really can be these types of people for one another. Even the most deficient like myself can be intentional, can just think, you know what? How can I catch someone doing something right today? And acknowledge that. How can I celebrate where I see God poking through in someone's life? Where can I send a simple text that just says, I see you, I appreciate you, you're valued? God, it's as small and little as that sounds, it's so different than the world we operate in. God, would we look so different in the way that we truly do love each other? That people look at us and go, you know, your beliefs are kind of crazy, but I can't argue with their effects. It's in your name we pray, Jesus. Amen. Love you guys. Hope you have a great week.